this is the whole stigma, isn't it? This kind of definition of normal. You know, I would like someone to enter the room who is branded as, I am the perfect normal human being, because I don't think such a thing exists. You know, we are all different and the world is a far better place because of it.
Am I right in saying that if I had had a dream to be an aviator and had been diagnosed with ADHD as a youngster, I wouldn't have been able to fly?
That's true, yeah.
That's the case, unfortunately.
We didn't set out look after people that have physical disabilities only. It was anybody who needed an opportunity in life, whether or not that's mental, physical or hidden.
Aviation can and does bring joy into people's life.
Yeah.
And there's a whole swathe of society who, if they don't understand themselves, are not understood by the people around them, are not getting that joy. Mm-hmm. And if with the trust, organisations like ADHD 360 and others can help to bring joy to more people, that could be the springboard, to use your words, to them having a better life, a more fulfilling life, and a greater sense of achievement.
Yeah, I'd hate to think that from a young age, people are already seeing doors closed. That's probably for us, isn't it? It's that sort of,
Love that.
you know,
That's a great expression.
That is a legacy. My husband was all about joy.
Beth, Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. Quite excited about this, to be honest. A bit of background to start us off. I reached out to you guys in terms of the Mark Long Trust, which we'll talk about in a second, to talk about ADHD and the trust and mental well-being in the trust. And at that time, you were being encouraged to reach out to us in a similar vein. And here we are. This has led to a number of collaborations, and here we are. And to set the tone, just so there is a tone for this conversation, 2 weeks ago, your man here, John, flew in a Spitfire and flew a Spitfire. So there is a complete crossover.
Yeah, there is. I stayed overnight last night in the RAF club. Grandad was in the RAF, wing commander. And a few months ago, Phil took me to the BBMF, at the home of the BBMF, and we did a full tour. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Where did you fly the Spitfire?
North Weald. It's just the best experience. Incredible. So, yeah. Couldn't be looking forward to this more.
So let's open the conversation for real. We're gonna build into the conversation how we can define disability. Do we need to define disability at all? But mental health being part of that. And let's talk about the trust. And if I can, Beth, come to you first with the difficult part of the conversation, really, about what the Mark Long Trust is all about and how it came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So after my husband tragically passed away in the Spitfire crash, one of the things that his squadron did was start up a Just Giving page, doing lots of fundraising for us. And they said it was for the family. And I sort of took a little thought about that and thought, we don't really need that money as a family because the Air Force looks after you really well. So what could we do with it? Especially as it was going up and up and up, and it got to £24,000 in the end. And I just had to sort of go and sleep on it actually for about a week or two and think, what would that mean to somebody else rather than to us? And I said, and therefore that means, what does my husband represent? And what are his favourite things in life? And one, aviation, huge passion for aviation, and two was a passion for helping people. That is always looking for ways to help people, whether it was, he wouldn't go home after work until he checked on every single trainee on the squadron and see if they'd had a bad day, they needed some help, they needed to go over a lesson again. He was always wanting to help people, particularly people that didn't have the same opportunities in life that he had. So that's what gave me the idea originally.
And bringing you in, Mark, Suggs, RAF name, birth name, Suggs, where does the BBMF and your passion fit into that then? How did that pan out?
I think for me it was a lot about Mark's legacy. He was so dearly loved by everybody he met. His influence and I think his reach, not just within the Air Force, but across the aviation community and further beyond, was quite incredible. An incredible person to have known. I'm very lucky to have known him and be able to call him a friend. It was, after his death, that. Unsurprisingly, the amount of people who reached in to support and express, their condolences, you could just realise what an impact one person had. And I think the trust, absolutely, its mission to help people who, themselves have been disadvantaged through no choice of their own. But to have the longevity there, that, his name, the Mark Long Trust, can go on, and really the Just Giving was just the start, and it was like, it can't end there. It just can't. So, we're still in our infancy, I think. I don't know when we stopped saying we're not in our infancy, but, we were registered only a couple of months ago. So it's still early days in our journey of, doing what we've set out to do. And I think we're really excited, aren't we, of just what the opportunities are, the people that we can help, and really where the journey takes us, which at the moment we don't know. I never thought we'd be here, for example.
Very mission-led, though.
Yeah, it is.
So it's good, and it's something that I think has been, certainly for me, it's been very cathartic. It was a very difficult thing for me to get over. I can't imagine for you, Beth, but for a lot of people, it's given me something of a focus to, it's been a very positive thing to do out of, obviously what was a very tragic event.
And we talk about physical disability and getting people flying with physical disability really easily. And what we've brokered over the last few months together in conversation is how mental health and mental well-being can also be, how can we get people with things like ADHD, the core of the programme, getting them feel safe to fly, being able to fly, being facilitated to fly, and keep that legacy in the wider context. And sort of when we first met and talked about that, your face came alive when we started to talk about mental well-being and things like ADHD. And you're not on the spot for being experts in ADHD, but I'd be interested to explore your view of why mental health is important to the Mark Long Trust as well as physical disability.
Yeah, 100%. So I think one of the things that's been going through our mind all the way through this is that not everybody's disability is visible, and that's something we've been really conscious of. And we didn't set out to look after people that have physical disabilities only. It was anybody who needed an opportunity in life, whether or not that's mental, physical, or hidden. And that, that's kind of, we've been looking at opportunities of how we can expand on that next year, but that's how we essentially reached out to you.
Yeah.
It was that, where do we go? How do we reach those people that need help? And how do we make sure that everybody who needs it is supported and spread that awareness at the same time?
I think speaking to you has exposed our lack of understanding.
Yeah.
I think that's probably been the biggest opener, and I'd suggest we're not the minority in that, of not really understanding, what does a mental disability mean? I think it's a relatively new kind of form of disability, if I could say that. I think
newly labelled,
newly
identified,
or and it's getting better defined. I think is having sort of spoken and sort of obviously met a lot of people now who've got ADHD or part of ADHD 360, and I think it's been quite an exciting thing to I think become better informed as to what a mental disability means, specifically ADHD, because I think in the round it is poorly understood. I think there's a very prickly stigma attached to it, and I think it's an understanding bit, especially within the aviation community, because of course I think most people would see that the aviation community, like a lot of sort of specialised vocations, is the preserve of the the healthy, in terms of physically and mentally, and I think seeing FSDP and what they've done, and offering scholarships to people who are disabled, and the first Mark Long scholar who had cerebral palsy, and quite an acute case of cerebral palsy as well, to see that it's a stigma that can be broken and people can achieve incredible things, and actually extraordinary people are not normal.
Yeah, I love that. And I think bringing up almost the Spitfire flight actually, and making this relatable to me, that brings all of you into this conversation. I dreamed of flying a Spitfire as a youngster. I watched the Battle of Britain, 633 Squadron, building the Airfix model kits whilst doing that. To then go a different career route. I did fly Chipmunks as a cadet in the RAF as a teenager. So during the flight, I was able to take control and had that whole sort of feeling of flying. But having been very recently diagnosed with ADHD, like months ago, am I right in saying that if I had had a dream to be an aviator and had been diagnosed with ADHD as a youngster, I wouldn't have been able to fly?
That's true, yeah.
I think that's the case, unfortunately.
Because I've learned that from you guys out on Chat Soccer, and I wanted to capture that because I was in all my sports teams. I was fit and healthy. I had quick reaction times I still do to things and so on. But actually, and so I don't feel like I've got a disability, but that would actually stop me doing something.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's that stigma or that label that's stopped you doing something that actually we could be missing out on the most amazing people,
Right.
that could be achieving really high things in aviation.
And one more thing, I remember sharing with Phil months ago when I actually put out on my LinkedIn that I'd been diagnosed with ADHD. I'm not accountable to anyone. I have a job. I don't have a scenario where anyone's going to judge me. And so I had an outpouring from a lot of leadership people saying how brave I was and how refreshing it was to have someone saying about this. And one person messaged me private is saying, I'm an aviator and I wish I could let anyone know, because I think she actually used the word superpower, which gets people in trouble, but she said, I can't because I lose my job.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually understand that she actually meant it.
And this is the whole stigma, isn't it, that we're speaking about, and the understanding that goes around it, or the understanding that isn't there when people talk about things like ADHD, because, and I know we've spoken about it before, but this kind of definition of normal, I would like someone to enter the room who is branded as, I am the perfectly normal human being, because I don't think such a thing exists. We are all different and the world is a far better place because of it. And we spoke about the Myers-Briggs thing that we do in the Air Force, which is something that it kind of puts you in a certain pocket. It's like you are that sort of person, but it's a personality trait, and it's, are you introverted, extroverted? Are you someone who uses judgment? Are you more impulsive? But effectively, it says this is your character trait. These are the things that you're good at. These are the things that you're not good at. These are the things that will annoy you. And I think the expectation is that all pilots, because I think for some reason people think we're all the same, that we're all extroverts and, alpha males, whatever you want to call it, but we'd all be in one corner of the matrix. And actually that's not the case. But the point is that everybody is different. And I don't think normal, if that is such a thing, really exists, and I'd like to see it if someone could show me what normal actually looks like. Because I think if someone put me under the microscope, I'm fairly sure they would find something that I don't think I am. No. Far from it, but the point is that that's what makes the world go around. And I think you mentioned the Wright brothers in the book, and if you look at people who maybe it wasn't a diagnosis that they formally have, but people who had all of the traits of being ADHD, as an example, the Einsteins of this world, the Turings of the people who have achieved extraordinary things.
They change the lives of others as well, innovators, disruptors.
But unfortunately, it's how do you nurture people. And I think it is from a young age, and I know that's your passion of sort of.
It's a change. That point, that's an archaic, out of date scenario that I can't believe still exists.
It is,
and it very much does exist. And talking to other aviators, and it's part of the conversation I really want to get into is, if people who are neurodivergent are fearful of the system not allowing them to pursue the passion that they're good at, safe at, that brings them pleasure and those around them. If they can't pursue that because the regulatory bodies are making it almost impossible to continue to do what you do, of course what happens is that their disclosure of their diagnosis is pushed under the carpet, and therefore their treatment is withheld by that person, because so then we get people with ADHD and autism flying in a brushed under the carpet. And I think we've discussed this previously, haven't we? And
yes,
it's bonkers.
It is. I mean, we likened it to prohibition. And that's it. You drive these things underground. And, are there people in cockpits now who have ADHD? Almost certainly.
We've got pilots. 360 have got pilots as patients who won't take medication, and for fear of what that will do to their career.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet that medication will give them better impulse control, better regulation of emotions, and so on and so on. That can't be the way it should be, can it?
That's a broken system. That's someone that knows they've got a diagnosis but can't and won't take medication that can let them to lead a better life. That's what this is about. They can actually lead a better life.
And be safer.
Yeah, the regulations need to change. People need to be able to trust in the medical system. They need to be able to come forward and ask for help and get that help, and still not have a fear of losing their job or losing their license. Because we all know that those people can fly and can be amazing and can do everything that they want to do.
Yeah.
It's definitely something we need to look into. And
we have Paul Hughes on here, who is an incredibly well-respected guy in espionage, worked within the RAF. At that level of detail, of focusing, and discipline that allowed him to be the best that he could. And the military identified that. So the RAF actually identified that and then plucked him out as someone.
Yeah.
And yet he would not be able to be identified as someone that could be a particularly good pilot because of that. That's a disconnect.
Yeah, same as my branch, air traffic control. You can't do that either. Yeah, with ADHD.
And it keeps coming back to this understanding of, you are tarring everybody with the same brush, and you're tarring it with a brush that you probably haven't done the due diligence of actually understanding actually what the condition is, because it's a spectrum, isn't it? It's and this is where I think, it is in its early days of actually better defining what does mental disability mean, what does neurodivergence mean, and actually, how do we deal with it? Because ultimately you've got latent talent within a lot of these people you don't have within the 90 percentile of society. And the sad thing is that from a young age, it's not channeled correctly. It's probably not identified early enough. And like you say, a lot of people are nervous of the stigma that's attached to it, when really that's the barrier that needs to be broken down, in my mind. And we spoke about, similar things, going back only to, the First, Second World War, of, just how poorly, it just demonstrates perfectly how poorly people who struggle mentally, even under the most catastrophic, the most hideous of circumstances, was so poorly understood that, someone in the First World War trenches, I don't think we could even relate to what they experienced, what they saw, and what mentally they had to comprehend and come to terms with. We now know it's called PTSD, but at the time it was called lack of moral fibre. That people should be struggling like this, and we know now that some of the the greatest infantrymen fought in special services, physically, mentally as resilient as they get, but have struggled under the circumstances and the conditions that they've been put under. And that's something now that we understand and we embrace, and we try and treat, because we know that it will happen to servicemen, and still now with veterans 80 years later, you can see that they are very, very emotionally still get very emotional talking about what they did, the friends that they lost, and that's 80 years later. And we can all relate to grandparents who fought in the Second World War in any service. And the thing I hear on BBMF the most from families is that my grandfather, who had an extraordinary service career, they only find out after they died because they never spoke about it.
The big learning point there is that historically we've not understood mental well-being and mental health as much as we've understood physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And the examples that you've now quoted, PTSD being a good one, and how 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, that was something different. We're now in that space with that opportunity with things like ADHD and autism. And the more you used the words earlier, because of this dialogue, you're starting to understand it more. And if we bring that into the Mark Long Trust, if part of what we can do with the trust is help people just even understand things more, your flying scholarships for disabled people is one part of it. But I think when we talked previously, the trust can have a bigger remit, can't it?
It can,
understanding
and it will.
and change. And I want to come back to the trust and exactly, you've had a soft launch and that's gone amazingly well. January, you have a harder launch, don't you? And you can see, following you on social media, the success you're having. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Beth, but
Go for it.
what would be your dream position for the trust in a couple of years' time, do you think, in terms of achievement?
We've been coming back to this question quite a lot and saying, what's our vision? And that particularly is a 2 to 3 year vision is what we're trying to narrow down. And what I think it is we want to broaden the opportunity so that it's not one person gets the gold-plated flying scholarship, but that lots of people get opportunities. And the opportunities should be given such that that person with whatever disability they've got can come away with, not just I went flying today, but come away with a newfound confidence or a new thing that they can say, this illness, disability is not going to affect me anymore. I'm going to do great things. I'm going to try something else next. Now I've tried flying. So we want to broaden, and we've got a few ideas of people that we're meeting in January to expand out to disabled flying charities that look after children with special needs, and other flying charities as well. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, we're really excited actually.
There's another spin on all of this as well, and I'll just bring you back to the experiences you and I've recently had. Up until the age of 61, I used to look up at the Spitfires that you were flying, and see that elliptical wing in the sky. And it was that even that gives a feeling of mental well-being, doesn't it? Just whenever the Lancaster or the Spitfires fly out of the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, social media tracks your flight everywhere it goes. It brings joy, doesn't it? The flight brings joy, everything that goes. We've experienced looking at that elliptical wing from the top down, haven't we, in flight? And my point being, and it's into your wider point, aviation can and does bring joy into people's life. And there's a whole swathe of society who, if they don't understand themselves, are not understood by the people around them, are not getting that joy.
They're not.
And if with the trust, organisations like ADHD 360 and others can help to bring joy to more people, that could be the springboard, to use your words, to them having a better life, a more fulfilling life, and a greater sense of achievement.
Yeah, so it's a legacy in it.
That is a legacy. My husband was all about joy.
On legacy, it's reminded me when I came back from my flight, there was a young lad, I reckon he was probably 10 years old, with a camera, proper camera, not an iPhone, and he was jumping up and down, and he made eye contact with me. I still had all the kind of a helmet on and so on, and he said, "How was it? How was it?" So it was amazing realization of a dream. He said, "It's my dream." Now, this kid then relayed how many flights he'd watched coming in and out and so on, and everything about him. One reminded me of me, and secondly was like, this kid's got ADHD. Now, from a legacy point of view, if his dream is to fly, even if it's one day Spitfire, but he could still go in to be an aviator. I've only just sort of learned that he can't do that. So on legacy, what do we do? What can we do to try and influence and change? This conversation amplifies it. I'm learning real time, and I'm showing it. We all know there will be very gifted, special pilots that probably have an extra ability, that sort of Top Gun-esque, if you like, potentially because of ADHD. But none of them can come forward and be tested because they instantly lose their job. What can we kind of almost position here as a kind of a suggestion?
There's two things there. One is, I think this is going to go out on television. I think we just need to be very careful. The regulatory body will say there are no barriers. The real world says there are loads of barriers, and it's closing down that gap in the regulatory body's processes so that they enable us, not frustrate us and disable us. I think that's one mission that we can work with the CAA and others to actually enable things more. But the other is to amplify your point. I'm not going to call him out by name, but you met one of my flying colleagues when we came down to see you at BBMF. He was one hell of a pilot. And when recently he was in dialogue with the regulatory body, they said, if you've got ADHD, we're going to suspend your flying license. And he was forced into a position where he had nowhere to go other than to hang up and end the conversation. Very similar, if I take it away from flying for a second. So he's brushed under the carpet. You've then got, I remember the first time, I'm an ex-police officer, and the very first police officer that came into ADHD 360's clinic was on the close arm protection for the royal family. And he believed at the age of 40 odd, as a sergeant in the Metropolitan Police, I think I've got ADHD and I need some help. He has got ADHD, and we put him on a treatment program of medication and sorted out those impairments and those symptoms that he was concerned about. He went back to the Met Police and said, I've got an ADHD diagnosis, I'm on medication, it's working really well for me. They took his gun off him and changed his job. And yet for 20 years he'd been carrying a gun next to the royal family with his ADHD untreated. So there was a chance of impulsivity, there's a chance of hyperactivity, blah, blah, blah. The moment we correct that, things change. And that's the parallel that we can say.
That's amazing. You've got me thinking about racing drivers. I had the lap record at Thruxton on the karting track, just little me, kind of in my microclimate, and now I know I've got ADHD. How many of the exceptional racing drivers are actually...
And that hyper-focus capability and so on and so on.
Relentless drive, energy.
It's my belief that an autistic pilot will be a damn good pilot because they focus on the detail. Flying fast jets, when you were flying Typhoon, you weren't Maverick, were you? You're not Maverick, you're not Tom Cruise.
Certainly not in terms of looks, no.
But it's about the numbers, isn't it? It's about data, it's about the numbers, it's about processing stuff. It's a hard job.
It is. And I think, coming back to that sort of personality test that we did, where everybody thinks we're all of a certain category of person, where we're absolutely not. The people I work with just on BBMF, which is a very small collection of pilots, I would say we're all very, very different. We all share the same passion of flying. I think we're all we're relatively good at what we do, but certainly our personalities are far from the same. But you're right. You are talking about a very specific skill, and you're right. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of looking at numbers. You need to be, say, impulsive. You need to be entirely consumed about what you do, and you need to be, have quite an unhealthy infatuation with, with what you are doing. I mean, because it's a job you're passionate about, but it does demand, an awful lot of attention, and it's a continuous thing. The day they say that you think you've seen it all and done it all and know it all about flying, that's the day you should hang up your flying gloves. So it's something that you never know it all. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it does lend itself from my very sort of poor knowledge of detailed knowledge of ADHD, but it does absolutely call out for a lot of the things that
obsession, addictive tendencies,
are the strengths of people who have ADHD.
We need to go back to John, your question about what can we do about it, though. So we've talked a little bit about regulations and how we can try and influence regulation change, which is really important. But I think the other half of that is awareness, because if you think about how much mental health has changed in the last 10, 15 years with awareness and how much more it's accepted, it's huge. And I think we can do the same with neurodivergence in terms of ADHD and etc. by just getting that word out there and getting rid of that stigma, because the more we can do that, the more likely we are that the regulations are going to be able to change.
Yeah,
I think that's where
that was a why behind this whole conversation, like removing the shame, which has some association with this conversation, but actually the fact that people are actually living a life that they could be living a better version of, but protocol from an archaic kind of decision years ago.
It's so archaic.
Yeah,
I don't agree with it, and I don't think we can change it overnight, but I think you're already on track.
Yeah.
But it's a shame it has a name. And it's shame. And this is probably a bold thing to say, but it's a shame it has the name that it does.
Yeah, with the word disorder.
Yes, because
it's not.
It's just all it is doing is describing a particular character trait. It's describing an environment in which you thrive. It's describing the things that you do like and the things that you don't. And we all have those, and the disruptive child, who's low attention span, high energy, channel that, and now you've got your Einsteins and all of these other very high achievers, and it's trying to see that early, isn't it? And I think looking at you talked about our sort of 3-year vision of how can we sort of spread our influence, and it's a massive thing, isn't it, to try and lobby with regulators, but to try and sort of tap into young children who we know have special needs, and they're in an environment that they're getting effectively their needs catered for. But if we can reach out to that and maybe break down the barrier, because it is all about challenging the barriers that present themselves when you are diagnosed with whatever it happens to be, but that actually aviation is something that there is potential for most people, if not everybody, whether it's engineering, because I think that's again ADHD to me, acute attention to detail. I'm trying to learn how to use CAD software at the moment, and my attention span is proving a bit of a limiting factor, but it's that sort of detail.
And that's part of the vision for us. It's not just aviation in the air as a pilot. It's all the aviation industry that we want to get people into, whether that's engineering, air traffic control. I just want to inspire a lot of the younger generation and show them what's out there.
Because I think
their special needs don't need to hold them back.
It's like, I can't be a Formula One racing driver. I can't be a fast jet pilot. I can't, I'd hate to think that from a young age, people are already seeing doors closed. That's probably for us, isn't it? It's that sort of,
love that.
That's a great expression. I'm going to leap into that. Young people are already seeing doors closed.
Yes.
If the Mark Long Trust stands for anything, because I play back everything we've discussed, if it's opening doors to give young people the chance to look through it and have a good, honest appreciation of whether they're into it or not, and giving them the opportunity to look through that open door, that's one hell of a strong legacy to Mark, isn't it? I was privileged to be in his company, never got to know him as a friend. The loss to the community and to you as a family was huge, but what you stand for, what you're trying to achieve, is a legacy any of us would want, isn't it? We'd be proud to work with you, but if my legacy was as strong as Mark's, I'd be really, really happy. And opening doors for young people, whether that's physical disability or just young people in general, I think you stand for something incredible. I think it comes out of a military background and a military career as well, wanting to do good and do the right thing. You're both military. I think it's amazing, and I think it's been a privilege to have you on the programme to talk about something with a completely different set of optics.
Yep.
But
how much of that interacted with removing shame, trying to make a difference, trying to break kind of sort of taboo stroke, archaic decision making of old. And back to that young kid, I can still see him stood there, who, you know, if he's got doors shut already that I didn't even know about, and he finds out the hard way, got to try and open them. So fair play to with what you're doing. Love to be wind in your sails and help you. 100%.
You formally launch on the 10th of January.
We do, yeah.
We'll be there. We'll be watching that with a lot of passion for what you're trying to achieve. No, for what you are achieving, because you've gone way beyond providing a scholarship for an individual. This has now become something that's much bigger. And I think on behalf of John and I, who are both deeply passionate about the aviation world and the neurodiversity and ADHD world, you're going to go from strength to strength. And as John said, if we can be the wind in your sails a little bit, then we gladly take part.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for being part of this.